Hoosier Nation, obviously, on Wednesday, the news came through on the passing of former IU head men's basketball coach Bob Knight, who is obviously a critical figure in the program for almost 30 years. And as Calbert Chaney just mentioned in his press conference that wrapped up a moment ago, it kind of hit him hard, even though Knight was 83 at the time of his passing. You almost always felt like Bob Knight would stick around. And Matt and I, who both went to school after the end of Knight's tenure, we're going to sit here. We're going to talk about our immediate reactions, how Knight influenced IU basketball even after his time ended as Indiana's men's basketball coach, our amazing view of all the different reaction around the world of IU men's basketball, college basketball in general, and then discuss a little bit about the current Hoosier squad looking ahead to their second exhibition game. We're going to dive into all of that and so much more here in episode 311 of the Hoosier Sound, where we are the official podcast of Indiana HQ. Our mission and goal is simple. We want to bring in-depth analysis and coverage for IU sports to as many fans as possible across a multitude of modern platforms. We're recording this edition of the Hoosier Sound on Thursday, November 2nd, 2023. I'm your host, Nithin Christian. Here with me is my normal co-host, Matt Lukens. Matt, before I forget, I do want to mention my blow by blow encounter of being in Assembly Hall when Bob Knight came back in 2020. Make sure you don't let me forget that. But as we get things rolling here tonight, your immediate reaction when you saw the kind of startling news that Knight did pass away at the age of 83.
Well, I mean, it was startling, but given the comments that Coach Woodson made at Hoosier Hysteria, which was kind of like,
right.
Keep them in your thoughts and prayers, not surprising. And again, like a lot of people have said and have alluded to, he'd been in poor health for a while. So I mean, time had run its course for Bob Knight, and I was super sad, obviously really bummed when I first saw the news, as everybody is, and rightfully should be.
Yeah.
But I would say my initial reaction after that was, one, we got to find some way special to honor him because he was a special person, right? I mean, he took Indiana, which was a program that was actually pretty decent.
Sure.
And
he had the two
prominent.
titles prior to his
had the two titles.
His time. Yeah.
But like I said on Twitter, he kind of took the base foundation that Branch McCracken kind of laid at IU, and he turned it into a palace.
Yeah.
Right. And the palace has gone a little bit it needs some refurbishments. And it's on its way back now, hopefully. But when Knight was at the height of his powers and Indiana was Indiana basketball, there wasn't another place in the country really like it. And I found it very interesting, all the people coming out talking about his passing, some of the videos that are resurfacing now of some of his takes, some of the more funny moments, some of the more serious moments, lectures. He was an interesting human being. And I didn't grow up Indiana fan, but I always knew who Bob Knight was. And I think his reach was so wide that I think some of the best stuff still hasn't come out yet about him, and that'll be more stories that are told in the next coming weeks.
Sure.
As people kind of grasp the news. And really, this is, I mean, as far as coaches passing away, he's the biggest coach to pass away in my lifetime that I can remember. I mean, you have people from every walk of life, every different sport, saying their condolences to Bob Knight. Sure. I think the next big one will probably be Mike Krzyzewski. But I mean,
we'll see.
Bob Knight.
Don't want to predict these kind of things.
Yeah, I mean, but there's the level that Bob Knight was, right? Yeah, I'm not saying because
I got you.
I'm not
like, in case you
FBI,
were able to travel
if Coach K drops
we just
randomly
gotta clear
dead in the next 3 3 weeks, it's not my fault.
Exactly.
No, but I loved Coach Knight. I think it differently than a lot of the older IU fans did, right? Because
Same here.
again, both of us, we didn't grow up with
Yeah.
him. I was 3 years old when he was fired.
I was
Okay.
9. Take that.
Yeah. But you at least might have watched a game where he was
I did.
coaching.
Yep.
And I
And I was
never
very,
got to
very
do
little. Yeah.
that. And even when he was at Texas Tech, I still didn't, I wasn't old enough really to know
Right.
anything about anything at the time. So again, most of the stuff is just looking back on history. But I mean, Bob Knight is Indiana basketball. Indiana basketball is Bob Knight. I posted on Twitter. They got a couple likes yesterday, but I really do think that Assembly Hall is his building. And again,
Do it.
I've seen people be like, "Oh, change the court to his name." I'm like, no. Branch McCracken again was such a big figure, and I think a lot of younger IU basketball fans actually really need to touch up on the history of Branch McCracken because that guy's the GOAT.
Well, myself included. I mean, I'll be honest with you. Like, I need to know more. But make no mistake about it, I think Dick Vitale kicked that off and said it should be named. It should be Bob Knight Court, Bob Knight Arena, whatever you want to call it.
It's Bob Knight Assembly Hall.
Just make it happen.
Yeah. And that needs to happen. I don't know what they have to do to Cindy Simon Scott to do that, but the building should be named after him, named after him from henceforth.
Exactly.
And there will not be another coach like him at Indiana.
Well, anywhere.
And that's not and anywhere really. I mean, yeah, exactly. He was such an enigma, that and an icon that it will not be repeated.
Never again. I mean, that's a perfect summation. There will never be another basketball coach like Bob Knight. One thing I would say, just getting to acclimate myself with his time as Indiana's men's basketball coach and listening to people I respect opine on Knight as a coach, that at the end of the day, Bob Knight could have coached any sport at Indiana and been the best at it. He got through to players better than anybody ever has in the history of coaching. There was, it didn't have to do with basketball. He could have coached the soccer team. They would have won the national championship. He could have coached the football team. They would have made the Rose Bowl. There's a way he was able to communicate that worked. And he wasn't for the public eye. Obviously, a lot of people disagreed with his methods. It's a different day and age. For all those reasons, there won't ever be another coach like Bob Knight. On a basketball court, in a football stadium, you name it. You listen to a lot of athletes speak about Knight, and they said at the end of the day, you may not feel the best, but Knight was able to get through to you, and that was the underlying moral of the story. If those of you who are currently students at Indiana, or maybe you're thinking about going to IU to study and to take classes and things like that, you know what you got to do. Hop over to YouTube, hop over to whatever social media you want. Search Bob Knight interviews, speeches, lectures. One underlying theme you'll hear as far as Knight's concerned is he was more of a teacher than a coach. He cared so much about, it's teaching the person to fish, not giving them a fish. And especially when you run a complex motion offense where there are a million moving parts, that is something where you've got to be in the system for 4 years in order to understand all the complexities. It was not basketball 101. It was basketball 501 that he coached during his time at Indiana from 1971 to 2000. And you certainly were able to see that there. Plenty of reaction around the world of IU basketball, college basketball. Trace Jackson Davis, Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, Anthony Leal, all sharing messages on social media. Jordan Hulls, who's currently on the coaching staff, Bloomington native. I was so impressed at listening to Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway talk to the media tonight. Again, we are just coming off of Johnson and Galloway speaking to the media, as well as Mike Woodson and Calbert Cheney. They carried themselves so professionally, speaking on how Knight's impact still exists at Indiana to this day. It was wonderful to see. And you saw former coaches, former players, everyone that had any kind of connection to Bob Knight just speak glowingly, respectfully. I'll be honest, I didn't know what the reaction would be. And when it's all said and done, I was honestly blown away at how warmly and respectfully everyone spoke to Bob Knight's passing. Eric Gordon called him a true teacher and leader that'll truly be missed. There's no way I can capture everyone's reaction to this, but of course, you had to crack a smile when you saw Adam Sandler post a tribute message on Twitter, how he won't ever forget the time they had together making anger management. Of course, the IU women's team was playing an exhibition game last night as the fans got the news, and you saw flowers laid outside of Assembly Hall there,
and a chair
in honor of Coach Knight, as well as a chair. I don't know. I know for a lot of people that chair moment will define Bob Knight's era at Indiana, and if that's the case for you, I hope you can sort of broaden your horizons a little bit and see exactly how he got through to his players, got through in a winning fashion. I was very happy to see Big Ten Network, and I want to tip my cap to them, bring a lot of former Hoosiers to speak on the behalf of Bob Knight, about how they remember Bob Knight late last night. Don Fisher especially was someone who had a lot of profound words, profound comments as far as what it was like dealing with Knight on a day-to-day, season-to-season basis, and seeing Bob Hamill as well, who was a sports editor at the Bloomington Herald-Times for multiple decades during the Knight era. Those are the people whose messages I wanted to hear, and I know a lot of Indiana fans felt the same way. I mean, as
Rick Bozich, I mean, the list goes on. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that have much better knowledge about it than we do. We bring an interesting perspective because, again, both of us hadn't seen it, but I mean, you guys got to listen to all the podcasts this week because
I mean,
there's so many people that grew up like this is their childhood, right?
I
like
know.
Bob Knight was you know, their love of sports grew from Bob Knight.
That's the way it is, and it's just incredible to see everyone's reaction in all different walks of life. Let's talk a little bit about the day that Bob Knight actually returned to Assembly Hall, Matt. It happened in the spring of 2020, before a couple of insane events happened in our lifetime.
Yeah, what happened between
it was like
that moment in 2020 and now?
Yeah,
huh?
It was about a 6-week span where there was a lot of just ridiculous twists and turns in our lifetime. You had Bob Knight show up at Assembly Hall. You had Kobe's passing during an Indiana men's basketball game, and the players were asked about Kobe's passing when they had barely even heard the news. And then, of course, you had the entire basketball season canceled just before March Madness, as the COVID-19 pandemic got underway. Matt, where were you when Indiana played Purdue? I was at Assembly Hall. I'll give you my recount of that afternoon. But where were you when you saw Bob Knight actually walk onto the court during that Indiana Purdue men's basketball game? And what did that moment mean to you in specifics?
I was glued to my television screen because I was not at the game.
Right.
But I mean, I shed a tear or two. I could feel the years of pain and not suffering, but just anguish that Knight and the fan base and everybody that loved him, wanting him to not be so stubborn, which was Bob Knight, a Bob Knight staple, right? And come back, and the university accepting him back. You know, there was a lot of emotions that day, and on top of, you know, getting our butt kicked by Purdue.
Wow.
But I felt like that was going to be a turning point for the university and the basketball program of the university. I was hoping that Archie would figure it out. But like, it just felt like finally that a chapter, a really rough chapter in the history of Indiana basketball had been closed. Like there was an ending. Was it storybook? Not exactly. But it was honestly, like, it was just such a beautiful moment to watch. And the whole, like, how often do you see the halftime of a basketball game? Like, It's always
Never.
the studio show. It's never a thing. Like the gravity of the moment was really laid out. Dick Vitale on the call,
Yeah,
whether you love him or not. I mean, he's a friend of Bob Knight
sure.
and honestly a friend of the program at this point.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was just absolutely in love
Yeah.
with that moment, and I wanted more, and I think he came back to maybe one more game during the time. I can't remember.
I don't recall. I would have to double check that. I don't believe that happened, but it was certainly a moment that I think brought a lot of closure
Yeah, I
to
don't think
IU
actually. Yeah, you're
fans.
right. I don't think he
Yeah.
came back. I wanted him to come back for more.
Yeah.
Like I think it would have
I
been
know he was
fun to
just
have him.
closer to the team, which that
Yeah.
in itself is wonderful. It was wonderful to see, especially end of the Archie Miller era into the Mike Woodson era. Woodson, of course, incredibly responsible, in addition to people like
Mhm.
Randy Whitman and Isaiah Thomas, for bringing Mike Woodson. I'm sorry, for bringing Bob Knight back to Assembly Hall. Being in the building that afternoon. The first half was awful. I mean, the first half was just sloppy basketball. As good as Matt Painter's team is today, even in February, on February 8th, 2020, in the first half, they weren't playing well, and you could feel the tension in the air because I know from the time I was going through middle school, high school, undergrad, and then Matt through your time at IU. There were occasional rumors that Knight would return, and then it never happened.
Every
And
once in a while,
in
yeah.
the first half, and maybe my memory is a little fuzzy about this, but in the first half, there wasn't a single moment where uh, where Knight appeared. He didn't appear on the video board. No one leaked a picture of Knight in Bloomington, Indiana, or in Assembly Hall. And even going into halftime, you were like, "Is this really happening?" And then you saw his face on the Assembly Hall scoreboard, on the Assembly Hall video board, and you're like, "Oh my god!" And you're like, "Is it really going to happen?" I'm only going to believe it when he actually walks onto the court.
Yeah.
Is that a fake? Is that like a visual, visual special effects? He actually walked on, and as many people have mentioned on social media, no one spoke. Like, no one gave a speech. No one introduced anything. Chuck Crabb, who's the PA announcer, didn't say anything. The marching band didn't play anything. It was literally just the crowd, deafening noise as Knight was walking across. And then it was pin drop silence when he waved his arms down and started yelling defense. And you could tell some of his memory, his sharp memory of times at Assembly Hall came back, almost from that conditioning. And the fans were chanting defense back as he was yelling it to the crowd, and he embraced Dick Vitale, and it was all over in a matter of about 10 minutes. But as you pointed out, during halftime, everyone was more engaged and more locked in and louder than they were during the game than over the course of the actual 40 minutes of basketball. But it brings me comfort, brings me peace of mind. And I know it does the same to a lot of other fans who are close to this IU basketball program. That Knight was actually able to make it happen, because I think we would all have a lot of regret if that moment never took place and Bob Knight ended up passing away. So shout out to Mike Woodson, shout out to Scott Dolson, Randy Whitman, Isaiah Thomas. I'm sure there are others that I'm forgetting here. I just remember sitting in the press room as Woodson and Whitman spoke before Woodson became the head basketball coach at Indiana, and now, of course, you see that's the new position for Mike Woodson over the course of the last couple of years. So there's a lot to digest there. Of course, if you want a source for actual storytelling, actual recounting of Bob Knight's time at Indiana, this is not the podcast for you. There are others out there. Be sure to, there's so much good stuff to listen to, so much good stuff to read as Indiana keeps things going as far as exhibition season. And opening night, Matt, is 5 days away.
It's upon us.
Regular season, the opening night is 5 days away. Matt and I are going to talk a little bit about what we saw in Indiana's first exhibition against the University of Indianapolis, and as well as what we're looking forward to on Friday night when the Hoosiers take on the Marion Knights. And then, we got a little season opener action. Matt and I will have another podcast next week to gear up for the regular season, but it's right around the corner, folks. But first, it's time for Who Won the Week this past week in IU sports, and there's a lot that we could talk about, but I think Andrew Saalfrank deserves the first shout out here. The former IU baseball pitcher appeared in the World Series for the Arizona Diamondbacks, and even though Arizona fell short to the Texas Rangers, Saalfrank played a very critical role for Arizona, getting them to the game's final round. He only pitched in 10 regular season games for Arizona. He's a youngster. He pitched in 11 playoff games for the Diamondbacks. So you could see how his value really improved as manager Torey Lovullo got him going in the World Series. Of course, across IU, you're seeing the Indiana men's soccer team, who clinched a share of the Big Ten men's soccer regular season title, and they have the 1 seed in the Big Ten men's soccer tournament. Nick Westbrook-Akine caught a touchdown pass from Will Levis in Sunday's Tennessee Titans game as they beat the Atlanta Falcons there in Nashville. So a lot of great news across the world of IU sports. Indiana women's soccer will hear their fate as far as in the NCAA tournament is concerned during the selection show coming up here in the next few days. Men's soccer, women's soccer, volleyball programs doing great things. So a lot to pay attention to as far as Indiana Hoosier athletics is concerned. Folks, if you'd like to subscribe to our podcast for free, all you have to do is search for the Hoosier Sound wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay up to date with all of our information by following us on Twitter at IndianaHQ and at the Hoosier Sound. This part is important. If you enjoy our show, leave us a review, tell a friend, share our links. Your support really helps us grow this podcast and reach more passionate IU fans such as yourself. I mean, I didn't even mention, Matt, that Trace Jackson Davis had a huge game for the Warriors against Sacramento. Eric Gordon, Cody Zeller, Thomas Bryant, all doing big things in the NBA. Indiana's moving right along here. There's no clean way to switch gears, but Matt, let's talk about Indiana's exhibition win over the University of Indianapolis. It's a bit of a bumpy start. The Greyhounds had a halftime lead. Indiana cleaned things up in the second half. What were your main takeaways from IU's exhibition win over Indy back on Sunday?
I hesitate to make supreme judgments on this game.
Yeah.
Right. I will say
that
sure? I know it's an exhibition game, right? They're trying to tune up for the season. I was happy with the response after getting their teeth kicked in the first half and playing like they were sleepwalking. And they came out in the second half and really took control of the game.
Yeah.
Especially defensively. They played very well. I was really impressed with Anthony Walker throughout that game. I thought Mbako towards the end of the game showed a lot of his promise. Clell Ware looks like an absolute monster on the defensive end. He's got to finish up his finishing though. Like that was weird. That was really bad in the first half. Yeah. I mean, he missed probably like 5-6 point blank layups. Like that just can't happen against FGCU.
Anybody,
or anybody, but like especially can't happen next week. So that was a bit alarming. And so I had people telling me like the season's going to be over and it's going to be a rough season right after the first half, right? Sure. And I don't blame people for having that reaction. But I would say, hold up. This is a young team with a lot of new pieces playing a bunch of different new roles. So of course they're going to be, speed bumps and turbulence along the way. I will say that I want to see more out of CJ Gunn. I want to see more out of Trey Galloway. And Malik I want to see
for me.
Malik Renew as well. I mean, you could probably say for most people on this list, yes. Sure. I would be remiss if I didn't mention Gabe Cups.
Yeah.
I thought he looked pretty decent. I actually really liked his intensity on defense. He had a cool floater. I thought he was pretty careful with the ball. And that's impressive for a freshman. So again, I mean, there's not a ton you can draw from this game.
No.
I will say the one stat that's glaring to me from this game is the 3-point shooting. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at 3 of 10 against
Mm-hmm.
Indy, and be a little bit concerned.
Right.
Again, that's, we lose Miller Kopp, who was a large chunk of our 3-point
Sure.
shooting. Jalen Hood-Schifino leaves.
Yep.
Who, maybe didn't shoot a great percentage, but definitely made some big ones down the stretch last year. So where is that production going to come from? Is my question, because right now it wasn't looking great. I did like that Khalil Ware hit one. That was nice. That was a fun shot at the end. But again, the offense has got some work to do, and that's for certain.
Yeah, they absolutely do. And I mean, at the end of the day, if you thought it was going to be a aesthetically pleasing product, you were out of your mind. That was never happening. And so actually coming out of that exhibition game, I kind of felt a little better about Indiana after the game than I did going into it. Like, I'm a little nervous about a lot of different things with this team, but I'm also excited because I think there's upside. And on the scale of nervous to excited, I moved closer to the optimistic, excited side after the game finished. I think if I look at a major concern of mine, it is that late in the shot clock, I'm really not sure what Indiana is going to do this year. I don't know. Maybe Xavier Johnson has tricks up his sleeve.
It's gonna be Mbako is what it's going to be.
Mackenzie Mbako. Maybe it's just, hey, you lean on team basketball and you figure some things out. But when you mentioned Jalen Hood-Schifino, Matt, that really triggered off my immediate reaction, because Indiana had a shot clock violation in that game against UND, and 1 or 2 other possessions where the clock really ran down. Now, look, maybe you put a little bit more emphasis on getting quick shots off. You get a little more emphasis on succeeding when you have fast break opportunities. But then, of course, when you saw a fast break opportunity, Peyton Sparks looked like he may have died on one of them. But fortunately for all of us, he was able to sort of get up off and walk off on his own power. So
I like what I saw from him in that game, by the way.
He was effective, and you hope the injury and of course Mike Woodson today was never going to give an update on a player, but we'll keep an eye on Sparks, whether he's available for Marion, and then going into the couple of games next week as the season gets going. Woodson did seem encouraged by Sparks' status post game after the UND matchup wrapped up. So there is part of that. But now that I've gotten the 1 or 2 major concerns out of the way, I really liked what I saw out of Gabe Cupps. And I think that's something where both across Gabe Cupps and CJ Gunn, if you can get 30 minutes of reliable backup guard production, that's going to make life a lot easier for Mike Woodson this year. Because now, instead of Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, and a bunch of who knows what's, you're going to have 4 guards in your rotation. And of course, there's still some work to be done as far as Cupps and Gunn are concerned. But in that matchup against UND, you got 35 minutes, you got 5 of 12 shooting. You had misses from 3-point land, but the guys were rebounding. They're moving the basketball. They were effective on defense. CJ Gunn was aggressive. Gabe Cupps was calculated. But especially if Ja'Kai Newton is unavailable for a long stretch of time here this season, having those 4 guys that you can rely on. Again, we know Johnson and Galloway will be in the 30-minute tier. If Cupps and Gunn can be in the 15, 20-minute range, that's going to be wonderful for this Indiana men's basketball program going forward. Mm-hmm. I loved what I saw from Mbako and Ware. I'll be honest with you. I know it was early and it was rough in the beginning, but I thought Ware actually was very engaged defensively right from the tip, right from the jump. And yeah, finishing was rough, but overall, that to me was more pros than cons as far as Kel'el Ware was concerned. And then with Mbako, of course, you saw him really take over there. And everyone with a little bit of an advanced understanding of basketball, as we've gotten to cover some more IU basketball games here with Indiana HQ, they'll tell you that the adjustment from high school to college basketball is more difficult than elite players going from college to the NBA, just because there's so much more of physical development that a senior on UIndy has compared to the sophomores and the juniors and the seniors you're playing against Lafayette Jefferson during the Indiana high school basketball tournament or basketball season. So didn't expect to take a shot at Lafayette Jeff.
Anderson is just taking
Lafayette Jeff taking shots. Well, let's throw a few other schools under the bus, like Anderson, Lake Central, throw all of them, Warren Central, the guys on UIndy, they got a little bit more build to them, got a lot more seasoning to them. And so that adjustment there for Mbako, you could definitely see that take some time. But now you want to see the Hoosiers build off of it. Any other shout outs from the first game there, Matt? We didn't talk too much about who Malik Renew, Xavier Johnson, Trey Galloway, the key holdovers. What did you like seeing from them?
I mean, I would have liked them to be a little bit more dominant in their performance, especially holders like Malik Renew. I felt like kind of was a no-show in my mind. Like I feel weird. Like that it was a little strange. I thought he would be a little bit more active, and a bit more. Yeah. What's the word I'm looking
assertive,
for?
aggressive.
A bit more aggressive. Yeah, like there was no aggression in his play. Yeah, and Xavier Johnson just kind of looked like he was going through the motions for the most part. Which I
get that.
I get that. I get it. Like I get it. But like when you're down in halftime to UIndy is not a good look.
Right. It's like, come on, man. Yeah, I got you.
And you're supposed to be the senior leader on this team.
Yeah.
Right. And so I got a lot of other, a lot of things I'm suspect about this roster and the team in general. I'm just hoping that they can figure these things out in time for the first game
tomorrow night. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about it. Tomorrow night, Indiana takes on the Marian University Knights. That's going to tip off at 6:30 Eastern on BTN Plus. So make sure you have that streaming service for this game. Indiana's got, I think, a couple of regular season games on BTN Plus as well. It's worth the money. So look, you can always cancel at the end of this winter time before Indiana goes into full-on conference play. But as far as I'm concerned, that production by the BTN Plus crew for the Indiana UIndy game was just like a regular season basketball.
Yeah, it was good.
In fact, depending on the channel, it might have even been better, depending on who we're talking about here. And so, hey, as we head into the Peacock era.
Are you taking shots at Stephen Bardo right now?
Look, all I'm saying is I thought the couple of guys broadcasting the game, and I'll give them a shout out here in a sec, but I thought they did a great job out. The film, the graphics, it was clean. So hey, hope we get that all year. But it's going to happen on Friday as the BTN Plus squad keeps things rolling for this Marian matchup. Marian's athletic director is Steve Downing. He was on Indiana's first basketball team under Bob Knight. He played at IU from 1970 to 73. A couple of insane performances by Downing in an Indiana uniform. If you haven't heard over the years, in his college basketball career, he had a triple-double, Indiana's first ever triple-double. He also had a 47-point, 25-rebound game against Kentucky in December of 1971.
What?
That'd be, if he was on your fantasy team, you'd be pretty happy about that type of performance in those underground college basketball fantasy leagues in 1971, where you wrote stuff on pencil and paper. I had
to check the newspaper for the box score.
You had to call the reporter at the game. Look, Indiana, Matt, you want to see them build. You want to see them take a step forward. Of course, IU's going to have all sorts of different things to honor Coach Knight during this game tomorrow. Moment of silence, RMK on the uniform, all that important. But as far as the basketball is concerned, Matt, what are one or two things you're looking forward to seeing as the Hoosiers take on the Knights on Friday night?
I want to see Malik Renew take the next step that we're hoping that he takes this year, right? I want to see him to be assertive. I want to see him be, they call him Baby Shaq. Like I want to see some Shaq, because I certainly didn't see any Shaq in the last exhibition. Right? I didn't see it. All right, because if Shaquille O'Neal was out there, things would have gone a lot differently in that first half.
Yeah. I mean, I'll take baby Trace. I'll take baby Marco Killingsworth. I'll take.
No, it doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be Shaq, but that's what the staff calls him, right?
Sure.
So it's like, come on, like let's play the game with like some seriousness. Like let's prepare. Let's take the game seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And I hope that's what happens, because if it doesn't, I'm going to be even more concerned.
Yeah, it's going to be a little bit of a situation there, because I think there might be a thing here where if CJ Gunn or Gabe Cupps take a significant step forward here in the early part of the season, one of Mbako, Ware, or Renew could get dropped out of the starting lineup. I think that's something we might be seeing going forward, and it would be very surprising to me if it was Mackenzie Mbako. And so you can kind of see the story we're pitching here over the course of the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season. There should be nothing guaranteed as far as Malik Renew and his spot in the starting lineup. So you certainly want to see Renew take that step forward. And it's the same thing for a couple of other guys. Trey Galloway is someone I want to see really, showcase his ability, showcase his skills. That he's a rock. That he's a pillar. That you can rely on him. But at the same time, you want to see him put a few baskets on the board, grab a few rebounds, and really, hit stride ahead of this Florida Gulf Coast game, which is by no means a Morehead State, Bethune-Cookman type of cupcake relative to what Indiana had at the start of last season. So you want to make sure that this Friday night game truly is a dress rehearsal going into Tuesday night's opener. I'm also looking forward to seeing more threes, Matt, and you called it. I want to see the guys take more. I want to see them make more, and I understand that in these
just want them to be aggressive.
Well, yeah. I understand in these exhibitions you have the advantage inside. Don't exploit that, right? Maybe if you want to work the ball inside, I understand, but outside of maybe Malik Renew sharpening some things or getting some stuff in transition, I want to see the ball move. I want to see it rotate. I want to see it go side to side, and I want to see three-pointers fly. I want to see Indiana hit double-digit threes against Marion on Friday. That'll give me a little bit more confidence going into Florida Gulf Coast. I'm going to ask you, Matt, one or two players you want to see, or one or two more things you want to see again in this game against Marion on Friday night in just a sec. But first, going to do a social media shout-out here. We're going to give a shout out to our channels. If you haven't joined us already, make sure you do for the start of this men's and women's basketball season. You can find us at Indiana HQ on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. You can also find us at the Hoosier Sound. Man, on Instagram, we're not Indiana HQ, but what are we?
Indiana.HQ.
There you go. You'll find us right there. We're going to have in person Charlie Mason at the Indiana exhibition game against Marion on Friday, and then rolling right on into the regular season. And then I'll be, fingers crossed, at the Empire Classic in Madison Square Garden when Indiana takes on Connecticut, Texas, and then D5 Louisville. We're not going to go there. Lafayette Jeff versus Louisville.
Lafayette Jeff wins.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I would say Louisville will be like a 10-point favorite, but I wouldn't put it out of the squad from Lafayette to get the job done. By the way, you saw Rob Finney post a really nice picture of him and Bob Knight, as well. So that was nice to see. I hope Indiana welcomes back Rob Finney frequently to Assembly Hall. They've already done it as far as some of the offseason work, and you hope that continues. Man, anything to wrap up from this Marion game on Friday night, or if you want to take this in another direction, just a quick thought on how Indiana needs to improve sharpen things up going into Florida Gulf Coast on the 7th.
Again, please just be aggressive in this game. I like impose your will. You are significantly more talented. And honestly, they're going to be more talented than a lot of the teams they play this year. There are going to be a very few teams they play that have the caliber of recruits that Indiana has on this roster. Again, you have two top 10 guys in their respective classes on this roster. Malik Renew was on like a high 4-star.
Yeah.
Gabe Cups was a 4-star. Like they should be able to handle a lot of teams just because it's just talent diff, right? That's what it should be.
Sure.
So I hope that IU can show that against Marion. And then last thing I want to see is I want to see a little bit more CJ Gunn.
Nice.
I want to see a little bit more CJ Gunn. I didn't mention him a lot earlier, but I from what I heard, he's just an absolute freak when he gets going. I mean, like just like lights it up, and I want to see him light it up against a team that he should be able to light it.
I love it. No, I would love to see. I would love to see that. I don't know what the conversations are behind the scenes, but I want some of these guys on the bench to have a shot at cracking the starting lineup. And look, I don't know what it's going to take. And you know what? If nothing else, Indiana may have an injury during the course of the regular season. They may have something going on there where all of a sudden one of the reserves have to step up. I really liked what I saw from some of the guys on the bench. And you start to think, okay, what can Gabe Cupp's upside be? What can CJ Gunn's upside be? Hey, Peyton Sparks still has multiple seasons at Indiana. If he's healthy, can he really take a step forward this year? Because the truth of the matter is, while as much as Mike Woodson wants to play 10 guys, that maybe works early in the season. When you get to March Madness, those rotations are getting condensed. It's 7, it's 8, the 7 or 8 guys that you rely on. You saw that happen to IU basketball last year. It happens to every program in the country. When Indiana gets to postseason play, who's the 7, who's the 8 that really take a step forward? And the crazy thing is how you play in exhibition season or against Florida Gulf Coast or Army, you name it. That's the type of stuff that can make a really big difference over the course of the long run. So whether it's Cups or Gunn or Walker or Sparks, and I'm sure I'm missing a couple. That's the kind of thing I'm excited to pay attention to over the course of the rest of the season. Of course, we didn't see Caleb Banks, and of course, he's going to play a critical role in this conversation as well as the year continues. Matt, as we wind down here on this Thursday, a different podcast for us, of course, with the news that Bob Knight came down, and then we talked a little bit about, Bob Knight passed away, and then we talked a little bit about IU basketball the rest of this week, going into the start of the regular season. Any final thoughts here as we wrap up on this Thursday night?
I am glad that Bob Knight was a part of the Indiana basketball lore, culture, and I'm so eternally grateful to him that he decided to come back.
Yes, right? Please. I'm so happy that happened.
I can't express enough how important that was. Because again, it would be so like, can you imagine what the reactions today would have been like? Like if he hadn't Bob and Coach Knight, sorry, not Bob, Coach Knight.
Hey,
Bob.
Hey.
Coach Knight needed to come back and kind of tie off loose ends. And
yes,
I'm so glad he did. And again, I'm excited or not excited. I'm interested to see what comes out over the next couple days about Coach Knight, some of the other stories people have. I mean, I read something on Reddit the other night in the thread about his passing. He's talking about how his parents, this guy's parents were big Indiana fans. And then when Bob Knight, he did stuff for his mom, who was a school teacher. And then when Bob Knight went to Texas Tech, they're like, they still wanted to go see him, right? Because, and thank him for all the things he'd done for him and his family. And Bob Knight was like, set up, here's a time for dinner. We're going to have dinner together. And like, My wife's going to be ready and at this time and da, 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 da. Like he was an awesome human to people he actually cared about. And you can tell by the way that his players loved him and looked after him and the excitement they had when he came on the court, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just what kind of person he was behind the scenes. Now, there's of course all the controversies come with him, and his attitude and
Yeah.
his bravado, but I think he's just for the most part misunderstood.
Yeah, well,
And
he overstepped his boundaries at times, like, and that's
yeah,
what ultimately led to his time ending at IU. But on the balance of things, I think everyone, as you can tell by the reaction, has looked at him very positively in hindsight.
as they should. He's the GOAT.
There you go. And from my end, first of all, shout out to the Big Ten Plus crew of Zion Brown, Austin Platt, and Amanda Foster from Indiana's first game. It was really well done.
Amanda Foster's everywhere.
There you go.
What is Amanda Foster doing?
There's that. And then of course, I think one thing, sometimes instead of a closing thought here or two, just from listening to Mike Woodson and Calbert Chaney and Xavier Johnson and Trey Galloway earlier today, they echoed a lot of the sentiments that you just spoke about, Matt, just as far as Coach Knight did a lot of things in the background that no one saw. And I think that's the kind of thing that you'll see come out to the forefront more and more here. He did not like to broadcast a lot of that to the public. And you're already seeing a lot of those types of things happening. The connections he made with the families of the players that he recruited. And then, of course, caring so much about them after their graduation. That's what's great about Coach Knight, and Calbert Chaney especially spoke to that as well. So all in all, I know it's difficult times for a lot of IU fans out there, but at the end of the day, Hoosier Nation will remember Coach Knight fondly here as we turn the page and get this basketball season going here. Exhibition game Friday, regular season opener on Tuesday night. But folks, that about wraps it up for our 311th show, The Hoosier Sound. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your support. To hear more fantastic episodes like the one you heard today, be sure to follow us at Indiana HQ and at The Hoosier Sound to make sure you don't miss any in the future. You can also go to our website, indianahq.com, to find it all in one place. But as always, thank you for listening, Hoosier Nation, and we will see you next time.
Peace and love. Go Hoosiers.
Name it Bob Knight Assembly Hall.